This one, by Howard Phillips Lovecraft, is called The Other Gods. Atop the tallest of Earth's peaks dwell the entities of Earth, and suffer no man to tell that he hath looked upon them. Lesser peaks they once inhabited, but ever the man from his plains would scale the slopes of rock and snow, driving the entities to higher and higher mountains, till now only the last remains. When they left their older peaks, they took with them all signs of themselves, save once, it is said, when they left a carven image on the face of the mountain, which they call Nagranic. But now they had betaken themselves to unknown Kadath, in the cold waste where no man treads, and are grown stern, having no higher peak whereto to flee at the coming of men. Remember what the Moki and Dina and some other Native American tribes say about the spirits? How there's areas reserved for the spirits, and how some of them like to just stay away from wherever humans are? They are grown stern, and where once they suffered men to displace them, they now forbid men to come, are coming to depart. It is well for men that they know not of Kadath and the cold waste, else they would seek injudiously to scale it. Sometimes, when the earth's entities are homesick, they visit in the still night the peaks where they once dwelt, and weep softly as they try to play in the olden way on the remembered slopes. Men have felt the tears of the entities on the white-capped Thuray, though they have thought it rain, and have heard the sighs of the entities in the plaintive dawn winds of Valerion. And the cloud ships the entities are wont to travel, and the wise cotters have legends that keep them from certain high peaks at night, when it is cloudy, for the entities are not lenient as of old. In Ulthar, which lies beyond the river Sky, once dwelt an old man avid to behold the entities of earth, a man deeply learned in the 7 cryptical books of earth and familiar with the Nakatic manuscripts of distant and frozen Lomar. His name was Barzai the Wise, and the villagers tell of how he went up a mountain on the night of the strange eclipse. Barzai knew so much of the entities that he could tell of their comings and goings, and guessed so many of their secrets that he was deemed half a god himself. It was he who wisely advised the burgesses of Ulthar when they passed the remarkable law against the slaying of cats, and who first told the young priest, Atal, where it is that the black cats go at midnight on St. John's Eve. Barzai was learned in the lore of the earth's entities, and had gained a desire to look upon their faces. He believed that his great secret knowledge of entities could shield him from their wrath, so resolved to go up to the summit of high and rocky Hatheg Claw on a night when he knew the entities would be there. Hatheg Claw is far in the stony desert beyond Hatheg, for which it is named, and rises like a rock statue in a silent temple. Around its peak the myths play, always mournfully, for myths are the memories of the entities, and the entities loved Hatheg Claw when they dwelt upon it in the old days. Often the entities of earth visit Hatheg Claw in their ships of cloud, casting pale vapors over the slopes as they dance reminiscently on the summit under a clear moon. The villagers of Hatheg say it is ill to climb the Hatheg Claw at any time, and deadly to climb it by night, when pale vapors hide the summit and the moon. But Barzai heeded them not when he came from neighboring Althar with the young priest, Atal, who was his disciple. Atal was the only son of an innkeeper, and was sometimes afraid. But Barzai's father had been a landgrave who dwelt in an ancient castle, so he had no common superstition in his blood, and only laughed at the fearful cotters. Barzai and Atal went of Hatheg into the stony desert, despite the prayers of peasants, and talked of earth's entities by their campfires at night. Many days they traveled, and from afar saw lofty Hatheg Claw with his aureola of mournful mist. On the 13th day they reached the mountain's lonely base, and Atal spoke of his fears. But Barzai was old and learned, and had no fears, so led the way boldly up the slope that no man had scaled since the time of Sansu, who was written of with fright in the moldy Pnakotic manuscripts. Certainly try to keep that from happening to your books, people. The way was rocky and made perilous by chasms, cliffs, and falling stones. Later it grew cold and snowy, and Barzai and Atal often slipped and fell as they hewed and plodded upward with staves and axes. Finally, the air grew thin and the sky changed color, and the climbers found it hard to breathe, but still they toiled up and up, marveling at the strangeness of the scene and thrilling at the thought of what would happen on the summit when the moon was out and the pale vapors spread around. For 3 days they climbed higher and higher toward the roof of the world, when they camped to wait for the clouding of the moon. For 4 nights no clouds came, and the moon shone down cold through the thin, mournful mist around the silent pinnacle. Then, on the 5th night, which was the night of the full moon, Barzai saw some dense cloud far to the north, and stayed up with Atal to watch them draw near. Thick and majestic, they sailed slowly and deliberately onward, ranging themselves round the peak, high above the watchers, and hiding the moon and the summit from view. For a long hour the watchers gazed, whilst the vapors swirled and the screen of clouds grew thicker and more restless. Barzai was wise in the lore of the earth's entities, and listened hard for certain sounds, but Atal felt the chill of vapors and the awe of the night, and feared much. And when Barzai began to climb higher and beckon eagerly, it was long before Atal would follow. So thick were the vapors that the way was hard, and though Atal followed at last, he could scarce see the grey shape of Barzai on the dim slope above in the clouded moonlight. Barzai forged very far ahead, and seemed, despite his age, to climb more easily than Atal, fearing not the steepness that began to grow too great for any save a strong and dauntless man, nor pausing at wide black chasms that Atal could scarce leap. And so they went up wildly over rocks and gulfs, slipping and stumbling, and sometimes awed at the vastness and horrible silence of bleak ice pinnacles and mute granite steeps. Very suddenly Barzai went out of Atal's sight, scaling a hideous cliff that seemed to bulge onward and block the path for any chamber not inspired of earth's entities. Atal was far below and planning what he should do when he reached the place, when curiously he noticed that the light had grown strong, as if the cloudless peak and moonlight meeting place of the entities was very near. And as he scrambled on toward the bulging cliff and litten sky, he felt fears more shocking than any he had known before. And then through the high mists he had heard the voice of Barzai shouting wildly in delight. "I've heard the entities. I've heard the earth's entities singing in revelry on Hatheg Claw. The voices of the earth's entities are known to Barzai, the prophet. The mists are thin, and the moon is bright, and I shall see the entities dancing wildly on Hatheg Claw that they loved in the youth. The wisdom of Barzai hath made them greater than the earth's entities, and against his will their spells and barriers are as naught. Barzai will behold the entities, the proud entities, the secret entities, the entities of earth, who spurn the sight of man. And one of the things with that is that being physically gifted, spiritually gifted, that's what being a prophet is. And it's not necessarily, an actual prophet. A lot of false prophets claiming, predictions and stuff, but there's different types of prophets, and not all prophets are, come believe my path and follow all my, interpretations like gospel and all that. That's not, we don't have those nowadays. Atal. Well, we have people claiming it, but, and the people who really were humble about it. It wasn't, Atal could not hear the voices Barzai heard, but he was now close, the bulging cliff, and scanning it for footholds. Then he heard Barzai's voice grow shriller and louder. The mist is very thin, and the moon casts shadows on the slope. The voices of the earth's entities are high and wild, and they fear the coming of Barzai the Wise, who is greater than they. The moon's light flickers as the earth's entities dance against it. I shall see the dancing forms of the entities that leap and howl in the moonlight. The light is dimmer, and the entities are afraid. Whilst Barzai was shouting these things, Atal felt a spectral change in all the air, as if the laws of earth were bowing to greater laws. For though the way was steeper than ever, the upward path was now grown fearsomely easy, and the bulging cliff proved scarce an obstacle when he reached it, and slid perilously up his convex face. The light of the moon had strangely failed, and as Atal plunging upward through the mists, he heard Barzai the Wise shrieking in shadows. The moon is dark, and the entities dance in the night. There is a terror in the sky, and for the moon hath sunk an eclipse foretold in no books of men are of earth's entities. There is unknown magic on Hatheg-Claw, for the screams of the frightened entities have turned to laughter, and the slopes of ice shoot up endlessly into black heavens, whither I am plunging. High, high, at last, in the dim light I behold the entities of earth, now Atal slipping dizzily up over inconceivable steeps, heard in the dark a loathsome laughing, mixed with such a cry as no man else ever heard, save in Phlegethon of unrelatable nightmares, a cry wherein reverberated the horror and anguish of a haunted lifetime, packed into one atrocious moment. Other entities, the entities of the outer halls that God, the feeble entities of earth, look away, go back. Do not see the vengeance of the infinite abyss. Is that cursed, that damnable pit, merciful entities of earth, I am falling into the sky. Kind of like, what the Aurora Borealis does. It kind of looks like it's, cascading upwards. It's kind of, And as Atal shut his eyes and stopped his ears and tried to jump downward against the frightful pull from unknown heights, there resounded on Hatheg-Claw that terrible peal of thunder which awakened the good cotters of the plains and the honest burgesses of Hatheg, Near and Ulthar, caused them to behold through the clouds that strange eclipse of the moon that no book ever predicted. And when the moon came out at last, Atal was safe on the lower snows of the mountain, without sight of the earth's entities or of other entities. Now it is told in the moldy Napkatic manuscripts that San Tzu found naught but wordless ice and rock when he did climb Hatheg-Claw in the youth of the world. Yet, when the men of Ulthar and Near and Hatheg crushed their fears and scaled that haunted steep by day in search of Barzai the Wise, they found, graven in the naked stone of the summit, a curious encyclopean symbol, 50 cubits wide, as if the rock had been riven by some titanic chisel, and the symbol was like to one that learned men have discerned in those frightful parts of the Pnakotic manuscripts which were too ancient to be read. This they found. Barzai the wise they never found, nor could the holy priest at all ever be persuaded to pray for his son's repose. Moreover, to this day, the people of Ar and Nir and Hathig fear eclipses and pray by night when pale vapors hide the mountain top and the moon, and above the midst of Hathig Claw, Earth's entities sometimes dance reminiscently, for they know that they are safe, a love to come from unknown Kadath, in ships of cloud and play in the olden way, as they did when the earth was new and men not given to the climbing of inaccessible places. Now, isn't it possible that there can be like an eclipse of the moon by a comet or a meteor that doesn't end up striking Earth? That would seem like the moon was split?